your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We've got a good show for you today. I don't have a guest coming up until the final half hour of the show, so if anybody does want to call in, don't wait till the last segment. We normally get a lot of calls around the last half hour, so we won't be taking any. So if you want to talk, ask a question, call in early, because that's the only way you're going to get on today at 855-4SCHIFF, 855-4-SCHIFF. Well, very sad day. I learned last night that Steve Jobs of Apple Computer passed away yesterday. He was a great American. You know, of course, I'm sure President Obama doesn't think he paid his fair share of taxes. He's one of those millionaires that's getting away with not paying their fair share. You know, Steve Jobs did a lot more to help this country than any taxpayers. In fact, what he did that benefited the country wasn't the fact that he paid taxes. In fact, had he paid no taxes at all, he might have even been able to benefit the country even more. What benefited the country was not his taxes, but his intellect, his drive, his ingenuity, his creativity, all the products that were created as a result of Steve Jobs' work. That's what benefited this society. That's what benefited the American economy. The company that he built benefited. All of the products, all of the jobs that he created, that's what benefited the economy, not the fact that he paid taxes. In fact, any money that Steve Jobs sent to Washington was a complete waste. I would have much rather had all that money in Steve Jobs' hands, where Steve Jobs could have figured out what to do with it, where to invest it, how to use it. I would much rather have Steve Jobs in control of his money than Barack Obama. I don't know if Steve Jobs would have put any money into Solyndra, but that's where Barack Obama put the money that Steve Jobs and everybody else sent in there. And I also want to talk more about this millionaire's tax. I want to talk a little bit more about Steve Jobs, but then I want to segue into this new tax on millionaires, because they really go hand in hand. But, you know, one of the things about Steve Jobs, I was, you know, like a lot of times people, you know, you go up on Wikipedia, somebody dies, you read up a little bit more about them. And one of the interesting things that, I don't know if I ever knew it or maybe I just forgot, Steve Jobs only went to college for one semester. That's it. One semester, half a year, and then he dropped out. Now, I looked up the college where Steve Jobs went, and I went to their website, and the estimated cost of a year of tuition, room, and board on this website for this college was $52,000 per year to go to the college that Steve Jobs dropped out of after just one semester. Now, I started to think, what if there's a modern-day Steve Jobs today who enrolls in that college and doesn't drop out, is persuaded by his guidance counselors and by the propaganda in the media that you've got to finish college, that you need a degree, you'll never amount to anything without a college degree. And so he decides to go, but he doesn't have the money to go. You know, Steve Jobs grew up and his family didn't have money. But let's say this is a very bright kid, but he comes from noble means or modest means rather. And so he really doesn't have the money, but they persuade him to take out a bunch of student loans. And so he goes to school for 4 or 5 years, borrows $200,000 to $250,000. And now he graduates with $250,000 of debt. Could that individual do what Steve Jobs did? Could he come up with Apple Computer out of his parents' garage? No, of course not. His career would be guided by his need to pay off that debt. He would have to get a job, the best entry-level, highest-paying job he could find, so that he could make those student loan payments. The ability to go out on your own, to take a risk, to start a company, it would probably elude him forever, because he is so much indebted after 4 or 5 years of college that's all he could do. So if Steve Jobs, and I'm sure had Steve Jobs even back then, when college was a lot less expensive than it is today, but I'm sure if Steve Jobs had spent 4 or 5 years in college and graduated with his class, Apple Computer wouldn't exist. It never would have been started. The best thing that happened to Steve Jobs, the best thing that happened to America, maybe the best thing that happened to the world in this respect is that Steve Jobs dropped out of college. That's it. Yet all the propaganda, hey, you got to go to college, you got to graduate college. You know, not only didn't Steve Jobs graduate from college, but Wozniak, right, his partner who helped form the company, he dropped out too. He actually went to my college, UC Berkeley, but he didn't graduate. He dropped out. So look, you don't need to go to college to be a success. Steve Jobs did it. And in fact, I think there are a lot of people today that are going to graduate with a lot of debt. Who knows? They may have been the next Steve Jobs, but they'll never have that opportunity because instead they're a slave to government debt, and they'll be spending the rest of their lives working off this debt. I guess the only thing they got going for them is eventually we'll have massive inflation, the dollar will collapse, and they'll be out from under that burden. Anyway, I also want to talk about this new millionaires tax that is being proposed by the Democrats to replace. I mean, Barack Obama's jobs bill included higher taxes on people who make over $250,000 a year. And I guess some of the Democrats are saying that, hey, that's not really rich. We don't want to stick it to people who make $250,000 a year to $1 million a year. We just want to stick it to the millionaires who are not paying their fair share. So what they proposed was started in January of 2012, that we have a 5% surtax on anyone making more than $1 million a year, which is about a 14% increase in the tax rate on people making that amount of money. And now I hear that they're trying, well, let's not make it start in 2012. The economy's still too weak, so let's make it start in 2013, but let's raise the surtax to 5.6%, so that we make up for the loss of money by not socking it to them a year earlier. Now, if you think about it, all the articles that I'm reading on this new millionaire tax, they all start the same way, that millionaires are not paying their fair share, and so we need to raise their taxes so that they pay their fair share because of the Warren Buffett rule. Now, remember, the Warren Buffett rule is about people like Warren Buffett who are only paying 15%. Well, if you're trying to get people like Warren Buffett who are only paying 15 or 17%, why are you raising taxes on people who are already paying 35%? And again, this doesn't count the 3% Medicare tax, which takes on all of your income. Let's leave that aside. If people are already paying 35% of their income in taxes, that's more. That's a lot more than people who are only making $50,000 or paying, or $100,000. If somebody is making $10 million a year right now and giving 35% of that money in federal income taxes, isn't that his fair share? Especially if that's a higher percentage than people who are making lesser amounts of money are paying. And, of course, if we add 35% plus 5.6, that puts somebody 35 plus, that's over 40%. And then if you let the Bush tax cuts expire, hey, you're almost at 50%, not counting state taxes. Anyway, I'm going to continue with this discussion when we get back. Stick around. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America, we're sorry. We're sorry. Peter Schiff is back on the air.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We are taking your calls, 855-4-SCHIFF, 855-4-SCHIFF. Remember, no guest until the final half-hour segment, so it's good to call in early. Anyway, before the break, we were discussing this new millionaire surcharge, this 5.6% additional surcharge that the Democrats want to levy on people who earn more than $1 million per year, because according to the Democrats, they are getting away with murder, they are not paying their fair share, and it's about time they paid their fair share. Well, let's take a look at a typical, well, not a typical person, but let's say you've got one of these high-income earners who's earning $10 million a year right now. Well, this individual, and assuming he's earning $10 million a year, not from interest and dividends, but from running a business and generating profits, and he's earning $10 million in profits from working and running his small business, and he's got a successful business, and the guy's making $10 million a year. Right now, he's paying pretty much $3.5 million a year in taxes, 35%. Sure, he pays a little less on the first 100,000, but as a percentage of 10 million, it's insignificant. So practically, he's paying 35% of his total income in taxes. He's got 10 million in taxable income. What about a guy that only makes $100,000 in taxable income? That guy's paying about 20%. This is taxable income. He's probably paying about 20 grand in federal income taxes. Now, I'm not talking about Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, just federal income taxes. So the guy who's making $100,000 is giving 20% of his income to the federal government. The guy making $10 million is giving 35% of his income to the federal government, or 75% more as a percentage than the guy that makes $100,000 a year. Now, how can you say that the guy that's making $10 million isn't paying his fair share when, as a percentage, he's paying 75% more tax than the guy that makes $100,000? But if you really want to think about it this way, the guy that's making $100,000 a year is contributing $20,000 to the support of the U.S. government. The guy that is earning $10 million a year is contributing $3.5 million a year to support the same government. Now, both of these individuals are Americans. They're treated the same. They have the same rights. They enjoy the same liberties and protections. They live in the same country. Yet one guy is contributing 175 times as much money as the other guy to live in the same country with the same rights. Now, how can anybody possibly say that the guy who's paying $3.5 million a year to support this country is a slacker? That somehow this guy isn't paying his fair share, that he should have his taxes raised, that he should pay another $500,000 a year to support the government, yet the guy who's only paying $20,000, he needs a break. He needs to have his taxes cut because he's doing his fair share, but the guy that's paying 175 times as much tax, he's getting away with murder, and we need to increase his taxes by another $500,000. And let's look through the math on the federal tax bracket. If you take 35%, if you let the Bush tax cuts expire by 2013, they will. That brings it up to 39.5. If you add the 5.6, that means that the federal income tax bracket for the $10 million earner is going to be 45.1%. But that's just income taxes. If you add the 3% that he's going to pay in Medicare taxes on that $10 million, that 3% comes to 48%. So 48% of the money is going to be paid in federal income taxes. That's before any state income tax. What if he lives in Connecticut like me, and you got to add another 7% there? Well, now where are you? 55%. That means he only gets to keep 45 cents on the dollar. Of course, he doesn't get to keep 45 cents on the dollar because if he tries to spend that 45 cents, a lot of that's going to be taken up in sales taxes. But, of course, he's still got property tax if he owns property. He paid some Social Security taxes. There's all sorts of other taxes that are going to be there. Maybe he's paying taxes through his corporation. And so maybe his income has been reduced because of all the taxes he paid on the corporate level. And the whole thing is ridiculous to expect that higher income workers are going to keep on working if they're keeping, 40 cents on the dollar? I mean, it's going to make a lot more sense for the high earners to try to figure out how to avoid taxes than how to make money. And that is going to be a big problem. I wouldn't want guys like Steve Jobs to spend their whole life trying to figure out how to lower their taxes. I want them innovating. I want them for creating. I don't want them trying to escape taxation. But this is the effect that we're going to have. Now, there's a lot of propaganda now out there I'm reading about, these higher taxes on the millionaires. Like, here's an article that I read, and you could see this article if you just Google it. The headline was, "The majority of Congress may not support a millionaire's tax, but the majority of millionaires do." Wait a minute. The majority of millionaires want to raise taxes on themselves? I have a hard time believing that. So I start reading this article, and it says, "The Survey of Affluence and Wealth in America, a study conducted in September by the Harrison Group and American Express, found that 65% of Americans with annual incomes of over $100,000 supported raising taxes on households with incomes over $1 million. Well, wait a minute. This isn't a survey of millionaires. This is a survey of people who make $100,000 or more. probably very few of these people in this survey actually made more than $1 million a year. I would think maybe 2 or 3% tops. So in other words, you have a bunch of people voting to raise taxes on people who make a lot more money than they do. And then the article goes on and says, hey, an even greater majority, 73%, supported raising taxes on people with incomes over $1.5 million. I guess maybe there was one guy in there, a couple that actually made $1 million, and they figured, well, $1.5 million is more than I make, so I guess I can raise taxes. Yeah, maybe it would have been near unanimous if they asked the question, do you support raising taxes on people who make $1 billion a year? Just about nobody makes that much money. So, of course, everybody is in favor of raising taxes on people who make a lot more money than they do. I mean, but if you read the headline, that's not what you would assume. Now, I looked at another article in which they're interviewing these CEOs that are saying, yeah, raise my taxes, please. And one of them is, this was the CEO, but he's the executive chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt. And I'm reading a quote from Eric Schmidt. He says that higher taxes would not prevent, or this is not his quote, but this is the article that says, higher taxes would not prevent him from investing or spending. Opponents say higher taxes would hurt growth. Now, here's the quote from Eric Schmidt. Quote, in my case, it is not a particular big issue because it would not change my behavior, said Schmidt, who earned $10.3 million in 2010. Now, what he's saying is if he's paid an extra $500,000 in taxes, that it wouldn't change his investments. Well, it has to. He has $500,000 less to invest. I mean, Steve Schmidt is a smart guy. I'm sure he doesn't bury his $500,000 in a hole in his backyard. The money that he is not spending and not paying in taxes is being invested. I mean, maybe he's buying bonds, which means he's helping to finance a company. Hey, maybe he's even buying government bonds. Maybe he's already giving the government the money by buying treasuries of that money. Maybe he's investing it in some other startups or, IPOs or whatever he's doing with that money. He is not putting it in a hole in the ground in cash. And if he has to send $500,000 more dollars to the U.S. government, that's $500,000 less dollars he can invest. Now, the question is, does Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, really think that the government is going to use that $500,000 more effectively than he would? Does he really think that the U.S. government spending an extra $500 billion is going to do more to grow the economy than if he had the $500,000 to invest as he sees fit? That's why they keep saying, all these millionaires say, yes, I would support higher taxes if the government used it to grow the economy and create jobs. Yeah, but they don't. It's like you might as well say, yeah, you believe in the tooth fairy or something like that. It's never going to happen. The way to create jobs is not to send money to Washington, but leave it in the private sector. Anyway, we'll be back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. We now return to the Peter Schiff Show. Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF. That's 855-472-4433. Rebel Radio. The Peter Schiff Show.
And this is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com and taking your calls, 855-4-SCHIFF. We got plenty of open lines, 855-4-SCHIFF. Remember, we have a guest coming up in an hour, so there will be no calls taken at all in the final half hour of trading. I didn't get a chance to comment at all on the markets today. I kind of went right into the Steve Jobs story, but the markets are positive. The Dow is up almost 50 points right now. It's a high of the day. Gold is up about $10. Silver up over $1. Looking at the ETFs, the dollar is mostly lower. It's been all over the board this morning, but it's now mostly lower. Not dramatically so, although the euro is now turned up. It's now getting close to 134. It's had a very wild morning. We had a lot of news earlier out of Europe. First of all, the Bank of England announced that they would leave interest rates unchanged at 50 basis points. But they did announce their own QE3. The Bank of England is going to be buying, I think it was 75 billion pounds worth of not worth of British government debt to create more inflation in Great Britain. Hey, good for them, right? The ECB, on the other hand, left interest rates unchanged. There were some people that thought they would drop them from the 1.5% to the ECB's credit. They did not do that. They also announced that they would be buying, I forget how many billion euros worth of covered bonds, but they're going to be sterilizing this. So they're not going to be expanding the money supply. They're just going to be changing the makeup of their balance sheet. So initially the market was upset. I don't know why, that the ECB wasn't going to create more inflation. It was interesting watching some of the so-called experts on CNBC this morning criticizing the Bank of England for not being smart enough to do what the Fed is doing and just print up a bunch of money. Ultimately, it's the ECB that's going to be vindicated for its policies, and the Federal Reserve is going to be, rightly vilified or, admonished for its reckless policy. And, initially, too, not only was the euro down, the Swiss franc went down quite a bit in the morning as well on the announcement that their foreign currency reserves skyrocketed to an all-time record high last month. They surged by better than 10% from 253 billion francs to 282 billion francs. Now, to put that in perspective, Switzerland has about 8 million people. I mean, you're not talking about that big a country. According to Wikipedia, the population is 7.7 million in Switzerland. So that equates to, in U.S. dollars, it equates to about $40,000 in Forex reserves for every man, woman, and child living in Switzerland. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, the United States, we only have about 50 billion in reserves for 300 million people. I mean, it's almost non-existent. I mean, could you imagine the kind of how much money, how much foreign exchange the U.S. Treasury would have to buy to have in the bank $40,000 for every man, woman, and child? I mean, it just shows you the extent to which these other currencies are supported by reserves. The problem is, all of those reserves are paper. They need to get more of them into gold bullion. But their reserves are now growing rapidly, just like China's reserves, because they are now trying to prop up a weaker currency. They're trying to prop up the euro, just like China is trying to prop up the dollar, and they're making the same mistake, and you're going to see the consequences of that in this buildup of foreign exchange reserves at the Treasury level or the central bank level. I notice we got quite a few callers on hold now. Before I start taking the calls, I just want to make one comment here. I was reading that there is a debate, another presidential debate coming up next week in New Hampshire that's being hosted by Bloomberg. And the debate has decided not to extend an invitation to Gary Johnson. Apparently, Gary Johnson wasn't polling high enough in their polls, although one of the interesting things is that the polls that they used didn't even have Gary Johnson as an option. So how is Gary Johnson supposed to register support in a poll in which he is not even an option in the polls that they're using? And the interesting thing is, a couple of the people, got support that was, within the margin of error. I don't know, 1% to 2%, barely ever. Talk about Rick Santorum or John Huntsman. I mean, they barely register any support, even though their names are on the poll. I mean, chances are, if Gary Johnson's name was in the poll in New Hampshire, he'd have got as large a percentage as either of those two candidates. Yet Bloomberg, and it's also Bloomberg is doing the debate in conjunction with, where did I see it? Was it the Washington Post? Yeah, the Washington Post. So they decide on their own that they're going to censor the poll and then use the results of the censored poll in order to deny Gary Johnson a seat in that debate. Probably the only good news about it is that not that many people are going to watch it, because it's on Bloomberg television. And just one thing I wanted to point out, I used to be on Bloomberg television a lot. In fact, I used to be on Bloomberg television more than CNBC or Fox. And in fact, some of my best interviews, if you have some time and you go to the Europac website, look at the archives from 2006, 2007, 2008. My best stuff is on Bloomberg. I mean, I got to talk a lot more on Bloomberg than I did on CNBC. They gave me a lot more time. They did a lot of one-on-one interviews. Many times I was on the show for a whole hour, guest hosting. So I got a lot of great stuff in. All my best predictions about the economy, about the real estate market, about the financial sector, about commodities, about precious metals, all my best stuff is on Bloomberg. I mean, it's not in the Peter Schiff was right video. The very best stuff I ever said on television was on Bloomberg television. Now, I haven't been on Bloomberg television in 2 or 3 years. They won't have me on. I mean, we've tried to get back on. They refuse to book me. So you might figure, hey, why is it, they don't want Gary Johnson in their debate. Why don't they want Peter Schiff on their network? And, I can't figure it out. I mean, I always got really, really good feedback when I was on Bloomberg. They used to book me all the time until my predictions all started to come true. And then they won't have me on. I mean, for years I've been trying to get back on Bloomberg TV. And they won't have me. Now, they won't give me an explanation. And the only thing I can think of, and, of course, I have no proof that this is why I'm not on, but the only negative feedback I ever remember getting in all my years of doing Bloomberg television, and it was one of the last shows that I did, which also makes it a little suspicious. I was on a show, and I wish I could find this one online. I looked for it. I looked on my site. I haven't been able to find it. But it was one of the times I was a guest host, and I was on for an entire hour. And during that hour, they brought the CEO of an auto parts company. And this was probably in 2008, maybe early to mid-2008. And this guy, this was a publicly traded company that sold parts to GM and Chrysler. That was basically their business model. And I asked him a question, and it was a very poignant question, and I can remember it. And I said, excuse me, so let me ask you, let me make a point or whatever. I said, look, you supply parts to the automobile industry. I said, we are on the verge of a major recession in this country. The housing bubble has burst. Housing prices are falling. They're going to fall a lot more. Home equity is going to evaporate. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. One of the reasons that so many people have been buying cars is because they had a lot of home equity. They were able to take out loans. They were able to use the money to buy cars. I said, given the fact that, a lot of people have bought cars with borrowed money, that home equity is going to evaporate. We're going into this huge recession. Wouldn't that mean that auto sales are going to fall sharply? And that companies like GM and Ford are not going to buy as many automobile parts? I said these auto companies have, they've loaded up their customers with new cars and long debt. They're not going to be able to trade in. They've got 5 and 6 year financing. I said I think the automobile market is going to really, collapse here in the next few years. Why should somebody buy your stock? Why would an investor buy your stock given, how difficult the automobile market is going to be in? And so I know that was not the typical question that he's used to getting. I know I wasn't disrespectful. I know I was very polite. I just asked him a basic question. Hey, and, he basically said, look, I disagree with your assessment. We're not, we're very optimistic on the economy, on the auto market. Now, obviously, I don't even remember what company it was. But obviously, look, within a year, GM and Chrysler were bankrupt. The market collapsed. I mean, who knows how far this stock dropped? I mean, maybe they went bankrupt too. I don't know. But I'm sure they got pretty close. And I'm sure the price dropped precipitously within a year of that interview. But apparently, when I was back on Bloomberg, the next time I was there, somebody told me that they got a complaint, that this particular CEO had complained to the network about my question and how inappropriate it was for me to ask that question. Now, they never said to me that, hey, because you did that, we're not going to let you on anymore. So I have no idea. But, certainly I think if anybody watched that Bloomberg interview, if they decided not to buy that stock because of my question, or if they decided to sell the stock they own, they're clearly a lot better off because they did that. So I certainly did a favor for the Bloomberg audience by pointing out the risks of investing in a auto supply company on the verge of a collapse in the automobile market and the economy in general. So clearly I did a service to the Bloomberg audience by pointing this out, even if the CEO who came on their air was upset about it. Now, I don't know if this is the reason, but the only reason I bring it up is it's the only negative feedback I ever got from Bloomberg in the entire time I was on that show. And I did Bloomberg all the time. But anyway, They won't have me on. Now, maybe there's another reason, but who knows? But when these networks stop booking you, they never tell you why. They just stop booking you. But anyway, let me go to the phones. We got a lot of people on hold. First one is Chris. Oh, well, we're already at a commercial break. It's like I got to keep an eye on the clock here. But Chris, hang on there. We will get right back to you as soon as we get back from this break. You are listening to the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million. Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
And this is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. And hey, before I grab these phone calls, I just wanted to say one quick thing while it's still on my mind. Yesterday we talked about two of the stocks that the National Inflation Association is pumping and dumping. And, of course, they listen to all my shows because that's where they get their ideas from. And, of course, in the pump and dump piece today, remember I said yesterday they pumped this OPTT, claiming that if the stock got back up to like 327, they were going to sell their shares to break even. Well, today they basically came out with another pump and dump and said, hey, just because we said we were going to sell at 327 doesn't mean we're going to do it. We're actually hoping to sell our shares at $5 or $6 or higher. And then they put in parentheses, although we reserve the right to sell it any time we want. So basically they're lying. It made sense. Gee, why would you buy the stock if the people telling you to buy it are about to unload their shares? So now they're kind of taking it back and say, well, we didn't really mean that. We're actually going to rate for a much, much higher price, but hey, we don't really have to. So they're trying to give people more reason to buy the stock. So, of course, it is up 10% today now. It's now back above the price where they said that they would no longer sell it. But also they pumped and dumped that mega precious metals again by disclosing. They said, hey, for the first time, the National Inflation Association, we just bought this stock the other day, and we bought it, and we're going to sell it whenever we want. Of course, the stock is up almost 30% today in one day. Now, this is a great business model. See, you buy a cheap stock for yourself, and then you send out a mass email to hundreds of thousands of people telling them it's the greatest stock in the history of the world, that they need to buy it right now, and then the stock jumps up by 30%, and you unload all your shares, and you make a fortune. This is what's going on here, right? This is, pump and dump, right? You buy the stock, you send out an email, you pump it up, greatest investment ever, and then you sell your shares to the people who are foolish enough to be buying them because the very guy who's trying to get rid of them, his shares, is telling them to buy it, right? That is the way pump and dump works. The whole nature of it is you are trying to sell your shares, so you're telling the buyers how great they are. And yet they keep on falling for it. I mean, how many times are they going to be able to get the same suckers to allow them to make money off of the same scam? There's an old, saying, a fool and his money are soon parted. It reminds me of Wall Street, where Michael Douglas says he doesn't even understand how a fool and their money ever get together in the first place. Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of good people who have been fooled by this con and I feel somewhat responsible because one of the reason that they have such a big database is because they piggybacked off of my success. I'm hoping that at least enough of the people who follow me, who unfortunately signed up with this organization, do not fall for these cons. Anyway, I'm going to go back to the phones. I had Chris from Manhattan on the line. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey. Two questions. The first is that you offered up a solution kind of to the student loan problem where you would forgive the debt, but under, certain, stipulations where maybe the program would stop in the future. And my question is, wouldn't that create a bad moral hazard for the people who just paid off their student loan?
That is... Well, I'm not coming out and advocating that we forgive the debt, but I'm saying that if we were going to have a program of debt forgiveness, it has to happen simultaneously with an end to all future government loans to education, because the moral hazard would be the government forgave student debt once, they'll do it again. And so therefore students would be even more likely to rack up massive amounts of debt, feeling that, well, hell, the government is just going to forgive it, just like they forgave this last round. So I think the only way that we could look at debt forgiveness would be if we put a permanent end to any future government loans so we don't have the moral hazard. Now, yes, for the people who finished paying off their student loans, hey, it's a bad break, but what are you going to do? That's not a moral hazard, because the moral hazard has to do with the way future behavior is altered. Not past behavior. So we eliminate the moral hazard by making sure nobody can get any kind of government direct aid or guaranteed loans for college. But I do think that if we do have a forgiveness, maybe one way to do it would be allow student loans to be discharged in bankruptcy the way any other debts can be discharged, in which case it would be kind of a means-tested bankruptcy, which is also something you could do. Maybe we can reduce the student loans to a certain percentage of somebody's income, or some way to do it equitably. But obviously, look, if you've got a job at Goldman Sachs and you're making a lot of money and you still have some student loans, I mean, you obviously can afford them. But any debt that is forgiven, we also have to look at the cost, because who is going to bear the losses? Are we going to have the banks lose the money? Because, after all, the government has guaranteed those loans. So is the government going to rescind those guarantees and allow the banks to lose the money? Or is the government going to make the banks whole and stick the American taxpayer with the bill? Because there's no free lunch. If you forgive the student loans, somebody has to lose. Either the banks and their depositors and their shareholders, or the U.S. taxpayer, or a combination. Maybe the government says, hey, we're not going to back up these loans, and then the banks fail, and now they have to be bailed out. So it is not a easy thing to do. But I do recognize that we are putting a lot of our young people in very unfortunate circumstances where they have tremendous amounts of money they have to pay back in student loans. Plus, they have very high taxes. When they get their first job and they're looking at the payroll tax and the income tax, and then after they finish paying all those taxes, then they have to pay their student loans before they have any money for themselves. And I know that ultimately, even though we're reducing payroll taxes now, look, they're going to have to raise taxes significantly on young people if we want to maintain the Ponzi scheme in Social Security. So they really are getting the short end of the stick, and something is going to have to be done. And that is why, I said I have a lot of sympathy with the Occupy Wall Street groups all around the country. They are angry. They are upset. Now, they're blaming the wrong people. They don't understand why the problems are so bad, but they do understand that there's a problem and it is bad, and they are suffering. But they've got the reasons wrong. They're not suffering because there's too much greed and capitalism. They're suffering because there's too much government, that there's not enough capitalism. If there were more capitalism and less government, their lives would be in much better shape. They wouldn't have all these taxes. They'd have jobs. They'd have a future. The reason they don't have those things is because the government took them away, not the greedy people on Wall Street.
Right. And then can you just walk us through what would happen if, let's say, we did impose a tariff on imported goods?
Well, if we impose tariffs on imported goods, the prices of those goods would immediately rise by the amount of the tariffs. I mean, and that, and what would it's basically a tax. And, so it would reduce the purchasing power of Americans. Ultimately, how are our trading partners going to retaliate? Are they going to resurrect their own tariffs to make it more difficult for our companies who are exporting to sell, ultimately reducing our exports as well? I mean, if you have a trade war, it's disastrous. But, ultimately, though, would I be in favor of across-the-board tariffs that would replace the income tax as a way of generating revenue? I think that would be better if we had a 5 or 10% duty on imported goods and we got rid of the income tax or something. I think that would be a much better way for the government to collect revenue. But to just add tariffs on top of the existing tax structure is the wrong way to go. Anyway, hey, thanks for your call. We'll be back. We've got another full segment coming up before our guest, or 2 segments, so stick around. You're listening to The Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show.
Make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans, and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
We lose freedom here. There's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
Call in now. 855-4-SHIFT.
That's 855-472-4433.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories,
Your freedom.
The Peter Schiff Show.
This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Anyway, hey, a few callers dropped off. You might want to try to get back on. Not really sure what happened. We had a full board going into the break, and now there's some people still left, but several people dropped out. Hey, I know President Obama is giving a press conference right now. I wasn't really able to listen in to hear much of what he is saying, but I do have some sound I wanted to play. This is from CNBC yesterday. This is a former economic advisor to both Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. And this guy is using his connections to those prior administrations to now come on television and bash the Republicans. And listen to the nonsense spewing out of the mouth of Bruce Bartlett. Hey, he'd be a great guest, I guess, to have on the show. But listen to this exchange about the problems that he sees in our economy. I got a few cuts here. We'll start with cut number one.
You say we should be doing what?
Well, I believe the problem of the economy is and has been since the beginning a lack of aggregate demand. And I think this is principally a problem for Fed policy. But I think that there are times when interest rates get so low, such as now, that you need fiscal policy to drive spending in the economy. But unfortunately, we had only one bite at the apple with fiscal stimulus. There's virtually no possibility whatsoever of doing more of that. And the Fed also looks like it's sitting on its hands.
So he thinks the problem with the economy is there's not enough demand. Well, yeah, I mean, people aren't spending because they're broke. So what is the solution? Not that we work harder and produce more so that we can have more supply and get out of debt. He wants the government to generate phony demand by running big deficits, or the Fed to do it by printing money. But what is that going to do? I mean, if we just print money, we're not going to create any more wealth. We're just going to succeed in running up prices. I mean, this is a crazy understanding of economics that says when you spend yourself into a giant hole and then Americans stop spending because they're broke, the solution is to find a way to get bankrupt people to spend even more money. That's not the solution. That simply makes the problem worse. But listen to this is where it really gets crazy. Listen to cut number two.
I think that in the long run, we're going to have to raise taxes to stabilize the debt-GDP ratio. I have no problem with that. But, of course, in the very short run, we have to get off dead center and get the economy growing. Personally, I would like to see a really, really big public works program. I think we could be rebuilding every school and every road and bridge in the country.
All right, so let's rebuild every school, every road, and every bridge in the country, whether it needs to be rebuilt or not. Let's just do it. I mean, if the country is broke, how can we afford to waste so much money rebuilding things that are already there? You know, of course, he's also in favor of higher taxes. Well, if Americans aren't spending now with taxes the way they are, how are they going to spend in the future if they have to spend even more of their money on taxes? I mean, the economy is in trouble. And his solution is that we waste our scarce resources rebuilding our schools and our roads and our bridges. What about using those resources more productively because we're broke instead of wasting them on things that we don't need? And how do we pay for all this? Where is the money going to come from to pay to rebuild every road, every school, and every bridge in the country? Well, we'll just borrow it. Listen to this, cut number three.
So how do we pay for all of this? What's the best approach to do it?
Well, borrowing at virtually 0% interest is a pretty good way to finance public works. If you believe the social rate of return is anything above zero, and I certainly do, then we should be borrowing like crazy. There's actually an unmet worldwide demand for Treasury securities that is not being fulfilled. We really need to be spending more and borrowing more in the short run while simultaneously tightening in the long run.
So his solution is we borrow like crazy. Well, I guess he's half right there. It would be crazy to keep borrowing, but that's his solution. Borrow like crazy. Well, isn't that what we did to get into this mess? Weren't people borrowing like crazy to buy houses? You know, he's saying that there is an unmet demand. There's worldwide unmet demand for treasuries. Well, for a while, there was unmet demand for condos in Vegas and Phoenix and Miami, right? But what happened when all the people who were buying those condos decided they wanted to get rid of them? Well, now it was unmet supply, and the market crashed. Well, he's talking about borrowing at 0% interest. Well, the only way you can do that is if you borrow in the T-bill market. And yes, right now there is a lot of demand for low-yielding U.S. Treasuries. Well, what happens in the future when the people who own those low-yielding short-term Treasuries don't want them anymore? They don't roll them over, and interest rates skyrocket. Then what happens? You know, but we got to pay this money back. And it could be very, very expensive. This is nuts. This is insanity. You know, I mentioned earlier in the show the foreign reserves of Switzerland amount to about $40,000 for every man, woman, and child in Switzerland. Well, the U.S. Treasury has just under $50 billion in foreign reserves, which are about $165 for every American. That's all we got, $165. If there was ever a run on the dollar, and I think it's coming, how many minutes do you think it would take for the U.S. Treasury to blow through its entire reserve of foreign currency? And then what would we do? How would we defend the dollar? The only thing we could do would be to dramatically increase interest rates. But wait a minute. We just borrowed all this money at 0%. What happens if we have to raise rates to 5 or 10% to defend our currency? After all, we can't do it through foreign exchange intervention. We don't have any foreign exchange reserves with which to intervene. I mean, how clueless can one man possibly be? But, of course, I guess the media loves having him on because kind of like, you know, they can associate with him with Reagan because they're all trying to create this idea now. And I played these clips yesterday that somehow Ronald Reagan would be for higher taxes, that Ronald Reagan would want to raise taxes on the rich because the rich are not paying anywhere near as much taxes as they did when Reagan was president, as if Reagan actually liked that level of taxation. Reagan was lowering taxes on everybody, and he would have abolished the income tax entirely if he thought he could have got it through Congress. There's no question in my mind. Yet these same revisionists are going to try to re-rate Reagan into thinking that he was in favor of taxing people, of higher taxes on taxing the rich, and that he would be out there in Congress right now lobbying for a big tax increase because people are not paying their fair share. Anyway, let me go back to the phones. Oliver is calling from, I guess, Montreal. Oliver, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Hi, Peter. Look, I have two questions. The first one relates to the valuation of gold. You often say that gold is not in a bubble. And, you know, personally, when you look at stocks, there's various ways to value stocks. You can look at ratios like P ratios, dividend yield. How do you come to the conclusion that gold is not in a bubble? Obviously, I understand the direction because the Fed is printing money. But how do you arrive to a value of gold today?
Remember, gold is not an investment. So gold doesn't have a PE. It's not a stock. It's not a piece of real estate. So when you're trying to value gold, you're not looking at it at the way you would look at an investment. So you have to look at it relative to the dollar or relative to the euro. So you're saying, how do I value gold? Well, how do I value dollars? You know, what value do I place on a dollar bill? And so what I'm looking at when you're looking at gold versus a fiat currency is look at the supply, look at the likely future supply, and relate it to other assets, because gold is a form of money. I think gold is money. I think dollars are money substitutes. But the question is, you know, what is gold worth in relationship to dollars, in relationship to euros? You can look at the supply of dollars and how fast it's growing. You can look at the supply of gold and how fast it's growing. And you could try to judge a reference. And that's really what gold is doing. Gold is simply a measure of value of paper money. And as gold rises, all it's doing is telling you that paper money is losing its value. Gold is the yardstick by which we measure the value of these fiat currencies. Anyway, I'm not sure if that answered your question. If you want to hold on, we'll be right back. We've got another segment coming up here on Peter Schiff, on the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show.
We now Now return to the Peter Schiff Show.
Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
Rebel Radio, the Peter Schiff Show.
And this is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. You know, before I go right back to the phones, I realize there's another Bartlett. We had a lot of sound from Bartlett, but there's one little clip in particular, it's a short one, but I really need to get this one in where he basically says what we need is more inflation. Here, cut number 5.
Quite frankly, we need a little bit of inflation, but the Fed is institutionally incapable of saying that we want inflation. And talking about targeting nominal GDP is one way that many economists think the Fed can talk about inflation in a way that won't spook markets.
So in other words, we just need a little bit of inflation. Wait a minute, where you been? We've got more than a little bit of inflation already. So I guess what he wants is a lot of inflation. Now, you know, yeah, maybe the Fed doesn't want to talk about inflation using that word, but it talks about it using euphemisms like quantitative easing all the time. Yeah, they don't want to say exactly what they're doing. They want to do it, you know, secretly. But of course, you know, if consumers are not spending now, how is increasing the cost of food and energy going to make it easier for consumers to spend if inflation drives up the cost of living? I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. But anyway, let me go back to the phones. I still have Oliver on hold from Montreal. Oliver, did you have a quick follow-up?
Yeah, well, the way you've answered the question was more general than what I was looking for. I'm trying to estimate what would be the actual value of gold today. How do I get comfortable? Do I look at the amount of?
As I said, I don't know what the absolute value, what the appropriate value should be to the penny. It's you know, I don't even, you know, you could try to come up with a metrics to figure it out, but I think it's kind of like a pointless exercise because whatever you think it should be worth today, the value is going to keep changing. So I think suffice it to say that whatever the real value of gold should be, based on all the money that we've already printed and all the money we're going to print in the years ahead, I think the value is considerably higher than the current price, which would argue for people to continue to buy gold and sell currencies. But, hey, thanks for the call. You know, before I go back to the phones, I got an email from my brother today who said he just had a lengthy conversation with Bloomberg, actually today, you know, trying to figure out why they haven't booked me in the last 3 years. And according to the head booker here, they said, no, it's nothing against Peter Schiff. They said that they simply haven't had a single segment over the last 3 years where they thought my expertise or my perspective would have been necessary or added value to any of these segments that they've produced on their network over the last 3 years. So I don't know how many segments they've made, maybe 20,000, 30,000 segments. But for some reason, not a single one of them would have been appropriate for me, even though from 2005 through 2008, I mean, I was almost on every week. There were plenty of segments that were appropriate for me before the financial crisis or before I asked a tough question to one of the CEOs on their network. But now suddenly, as all these predictions are coming true, I mean, you would think that my perspective would be more relevant now than ever before, especially since I'd be willing to bet there isn't a single individual that came on Bloomberg as often as I did and more accurately forecast the things that were going to happen in the U.S. economy and in the U.S. financial markets and the commodity markets and the precious metal markets and the currency markets than I did. I mean, I would challenge them to find anybody who delivered more pertinent, meaningful, worthwhile, and timely information to their audience than me. Yet for some reason, hey, they can't find a single segment, not one, where they thought I would add any value to the segment. Anyway, this doesn't make any sense to me. So there obviously is something going on that they do not want to admit. Anyway, back to the phones. Mo is calling from Florida. Mo, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm a longtime listener, client, and I'm going to make a comment and ask a question, and then I'll just hang up and wait for your answer. But my comment, first of all, is just email Bloomberg or call them and tell them you'll shade the truth and you know, and not be you know, upfront with the audience, and maybe they'll get you back on. That's my comment. But my question is, I know you made some comments about the boycott or the protest on Wall Street, and I agree with you. they're protesting the wrong thing. Now there's an internet effort to Friday to protest all the Federal Reserve banks in the United States, and I want it because without the Federal Reserve set up in 1913, we could have never had this phony money, and this problem would have never happened. But I want to know what you think about shifting the effort to boycotting, or not boycotting, but protesting the Federal Reserve location.
Yeah, I think we should, but I don't think we should limit our protest to the Federal Reserve. We should be protesting Congress. We should be protesting the White House. We should be protesting the Supreme Court. I think Americans have been failed by all branches of government. We are suffering from an excess of government. Government is the cancer, whether it's central banking from the Fed, central planning from Washington, or a lack of respect for the Constitution from the Supreme Court. All of our branches have failed us. There has been no check and balance. We've basically been screwed from every angle up in Washington. That's where all these protesters should be. They should come from all over the country. If they want to camp out somewhere, camp out in front of the White House, camp out in front of the Federal Reserve, camp out in front of the Supreme Court, camp out in front of Congress. That's where we need to be.
Don't you think we should abolish the Federal Reserve, though?
Well, we need to abolish a lot of stuff, but my fear about just abolishing the Federal Reserve is that we'd replace it with something worse. So, the devil you know is often better than the one that you don't. And if the devil we don't know is just Congress or the president, if Congress just takes over the printing press, they're going to use it even more. It'll be even worse. So we can't just abandon it. We have to have some understanding of what's going on. I'd rather reform it, take away its power, and then get rid of it. But don't leave all of its power, get rid of it, and leave a vacuum and have the Congress swoop in and fill that void. That would be really asking for trouble. But anyway, well, thanks for the call. I'll see if I can squeeze in a last caller, Ash calling from Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hey, Peter, thanks for taking my call. My question's about since the American consumer is going to have a lower standard of living in the coming years, how much do you think that's going to affect China and a possible slowdown in China? And do you think that a rise in the RMB could offset this slowdown by allowing more domestic spending by the Chinese citizens?
Well, you just answered your own question. Exactly. I think we're a drag on the Chinese economy. Having to prop us up is slowing them down. I think when they stop propping up our currency and allow their own currency to rise, that they will create far more demand in China than they lose in America. And after all, the Chinese will be better off enjoying their own products than going without them and shipping them over to us. So, yeah, I think the best thing that can happen to China is that they let the dollar crash and that they start investing their money domestically and producing more things for themselves instead of producing stuff for us and warehousing our treasuries. Anyway, that's it. We will be back. We've got a great discussion coming up with some guests who are being harassed and hassled by the U.S. government in the courts. Their story coming up, so don't go away. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show.
We now return to the Peter Schiff Show.
Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
Rebel Radio, the Peter Schiff Show.
This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. And now we have an interesting discussion with Mike and Chantel Sackett, along with their attorney, Damian Schiff, no relation, by the way. And they are going to recall or talk about their saga where they are really being oppressed by an out-of-control government under the guise of the EPA. Anyway, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Yes, how are you?
I am well. So first, can you give my audience just a quick little background on your case and what the issues are? Does that? I mean, either Damian could mention it, or Mike or Chantel.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and do a quick thing on the legal issues, and Mike and Chantel can talk about the facts. But the main issue right now before the Supreme Court is about judicial review and whether when the government comes onto your property and tells you that you can't build your home, that you're filling in federal wetlands, that you need a permit, that you have a right to go into court and to sue that federal agency and say, look, we don't have any wetlands on our property, we don't need to get a permit, and therefore you can't threaten us with thousands of dollars per day in fines. And unfortunately, up until now, all the lower federal courts who have addressed this issue have said that property owners who are in the Sackett's condition don't have that right. But I think Mike and Chantel can fill you in on the background story.
Mike, you want to go ahead and, I mean, I've got the information myself, but I just assume have you describe it in your own words. Can Mike hear me?
Sorry.
Well, anyway, like from my understanding of the background in this case, the Sackett's purchased a piece of property to build a house on it, and they purchased a property, no idea that they were buying federally protected wetlands. No indication. They had proper permits locally to build on that property, and somewhere along the process, EPA agents came in and said, you can't build here. In fact, you need to destroy all the building that you've done, and you need to fence this property in, and you need to keep it as some kind of wilderness preserved wetlands for all eternity, and threaten to impose them with sharp fines for every day that they failed to return that wetlands to its original condition. Is that pretty much a good synopsis of the facts?
Yeah, that's exactly a great synopsis of exactly what went on. They came in and told us, you can't do this, and don't even try asking for anything, and we're going to impose these fines and do what we say, and then hopefully,
Who did you buy the property from?
A local gentleman up here sold the property to us. It was a gentleman that we've known for a very long time.
Did he have any indication that the property he was selling you was federally protected wetlands?
No, he didn't. In fact, one of the things that we did when we went back to research is look at our warranty.
Yeah,
the title insurance.
And in the title insurance, there was a company that did the check, and they didn't see any problems with the property.
No, there was nothing in the title insurance.
Miska, I mean, how much water is on your property? I mean, how wet is this land?
There is no water on the property.
Is there any wildlife hanging out there?
Oh, the occasional deer runs through.
But, I mean, now I understand there are plenty of houses that surround your property, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Does the land that these other houses are sitting on, do they look any different than your land?
No, not really. I don't know if you've ever seen the overview off of Google.
Yeah, and so the title companies or the sellers, nobody is liable then to you? I mean, you're the one that's stuck holding the bag because you were holding the property when the music stopped and if some bureaucrat decided that it was wetlands?
Well, actually, the Bonner County, because they issued the permits to build, they will have some liability. But right now, it's different than that. It's coming to the point where, nobody in America can go buy a piece of property unless, they check and see if it's wetlands. If you aren't going to buy a piece of property if it's wetlands, correct? But this is what the government wants you to do.
But what would even make you think that it might have been wetlands? I mean, if you don't see any water on the property, if it's not like a wilderness area, why would you even think it was a wetland?
We didn't. That's why we bought it. It's in a subdivision.
How much did you pay for the property, if you don't mind my asking?
$23,000.
Did you borrow any of the money, or did you pay cash?
Well, no, we got a small loan and just, made payments.
Mm-hmm. But you put up mostly your own equity into the property.
That is correct.
So here you are putting your own money into a property, and the government's trying to destroy it. Meanwhile, there are other people that bought property with nothing down, and the government's trying to keep them in the property, prevent the banks from foreclosing. But here you are. You used your own money. You didn't borrow over your head. You bought a piece of property that you own, and you want to build on it, and the government is trying to kick you off your own land.
That's correct.
Now, do they expect you to take care of it as some kind of preserve? I mean, because you have to pay. Wouldn't you have to keep paying taxes on it, even though you couldn't build on it?
Yeah, we've had to pay taxes on it from the very beginning, and that hasn't changed.
So the government wants you to turn your land into a wilderness sanctuary and have you maintain it at your expense and pay property taxes to the state on property that you can't do anything with for your own use.
Correct.
And have they offered in any way to compensate you for taking your private property?
No. What they've offered us is over $40 million in fines, though.
$40 million?
Yeah, that's what it's racked up to be so far. Correct me if I'm wrong, Damien, but isn't that about what it's at?
No, you're absolutely right, Chantel, because the EPA says that each day that you don't comply with the compliance order and you don't take out the fill and restore the property, it's a maximum of $37,500 per day in fines.
Have they made any effort to collect any of these fines?
No, Peter. Actually, what they have to do first is they'd have to go into court and sue the Sacketts. And, of course, that's actually what the Sacketts would like, because once they're into court, then they can defend themselves and say, look, there are no wetlands here, therefore we're not liable for any fines. But
well, of course, isn't that what due process is all about? I mean, if the government wants to take, and this amounts to a taking, if the government wants to take the Sacketts' property, wouldn't they have to have a hearing? Wouldn't they have to go to court and give them the opportunity to have their day in court to prove, A, that the property isn't wetlands? And if it is wetlands and the U.S. government wants to take it, what about just compensation? What about the whole – isn't eminent domain if the government's going to take something that they have to pay a fair market value for what they're taking, that they just can't seize it like they're Attila the Hun?
You are absolutely right, but unfortunately the way the law stands now, the EPA can bully people like the Sacketts into following their orders without having a federal judge call out the EPA on violating the law.
So the Constitution basically doesn't apply for the EPA. So we should probably put a little asterisk on the Constitution and say, hey, this document doesn't apply to the EPA. They can do whatever they want.
That's certainly been their attitude.
And so now I understand that this case now has, in fact, made it to the Supreme Court?
Yes, that's exactly right, Peter. We were accepted for review last June, and we've just filed our opening brief in the Supreme Court, and we expect that the court will have a hearing on our case probably in January.
You know, now I know that I'm sure that taking a case all the way to the Supreme Court and litigating it is very expensive. I mean, are you doing this pro bono, or are the Chantels or the Sacketts are they actually paying the full cost of this?
No, as a matter of fact, Peter, I work at Civic Legal Foundation, and we are a public interest legal foundation that litigates for issues like this, issues for private property protection, limited government, and free enterprise, and we represent all of our clients, including the Sacketts, pro bono, so we don't charge attorney fees. And frankly, that's important because most folks would not have the financial ability to hire a private attorney to litigate a case from the trial court all the way up into the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, EPA knows that, and they realize that because most folks can't fight back, they have the upper hand.
Absolutely. It's real legalized extortion. In fact, a good part of the legal profession is extortion because of the high cost of legal bills. I really appreciate what you're doing. I don't know if you're an organization that takes donations. If any of my listeners want to donate to your organization to help pursue these types of cases, how do they do that?
It's very simple, Peter. We are, in fact, a 100% donor-supported organization. And they can simply navigate to our homepage, pacificlegal.org, and there's a donate button there, and they can read more about not just the Sacketts case, but other cases that we have raising the same types of issues, fighting for the same basic constitutional rights.
Yeah, I'm also curious, too, how much money do you think the Sacketts would have to spend to return their land back to the condition that the EPA is ordering them to return it to?
That's a great question, and I can estimate, but I think Mike and Chantel, perhaps you guys would like to give a little estimate on that.
Peter, this is Mike. To put it back the way they want it, we have to buy special wetlands plants, and I don't know what the cost of those plants are. But just to put it back the way it was before we touched it would be between $50,000 and $60,000.
So that's twice what you paid for the land in the first place.
Exactly.
I mean, wouldn't it make more sense if that were the case for you to just walk away from the property and give it to the bank? Because apparently there is a small loan on it. Wouldn't you just been able to walk away and Wouldn't that be cheaper than actually doing what the government wants you to do?
Well, we tried that. We actually, in the very beginning, before we got involved with the Pacific Legal Foundation, we tried just to gift them the land and walk away from it because it wasn't worth the fight. But
they wouldn't take it.
No, that's not how the EPA operates. They know that they got you backed in a corner. They know that you have no way out. And honestly, without the PLF, I would imagine that my wife and I would have, we would have lost everything we have. We run a small business with 30 employees, and that'd be 30 employees without jobs.
So because this would have bankrupted you, not only impacting your own lives, but the lives of the 30 people that you employ.
That's correct.
How many years has this been going on? How long have they been putting you through this?
4 years.
And I can imagine as a small business owner, it's hard enough, especially in this economy, to run your business. Imagine trying to do it with all this bothering you every night. How do you even fall asleep with all the headaches of a business owner and then having the EPA putting you through hell?
It's not easy. And, the other thing is they haven't exactly done our business any favors either.
What kind of business are you in?
Excavation.
Oh, so you actually might be able to, your business might actually be able to assist you in this reclamation process that they're trying to force on you. Exactly. So you might even be able to do it at a lower cost than somebody might have done if they were in a completely different business, which is, just probably a pure coincidence. But anyway, when we get back, I want to talk more about the specific issues that are going to be litigated here at the Supreme Court and what is at stake. What happens if we win this case, or what happens, God forbid, if the Sacketts lose this case? What does that do to freedom in the United States? So we'll be right back when Peter Schiff Show continues, so stick around.
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million.
Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back. If you had any delusions that the world was sane, hopefully they're shattered now after listening to this saga of the Sacketts. And we're talking with Mike and Chantel Sackett and their lawyer, Damian Schiff. During the break, there's the President Obama is having a press conference, and in that conference, he was actually ridiculing Republicans who want to get rid of the EPA by claiming that we're not going to create jobs by eliminating clean air and clean water, as if the EPA is anything about clean air and clean water. It really is an agency about a social agenda of socialism, depriving people of property without due process. But I want to know, so let my audience know what these issues are that you are bringing up to the Supreme Court.
Well, Peter.
Yes. Can you hear me? Damian.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to know. So, what specifically? I know when you go to the Supreme Court, you have to go on certain issues. So, what are the issues that you are bringing to the court? And I understand that the Obama administration has filed a brief in support of the EPA.
Right. No, the EPA is certainly receiving the full support of the administration, and the issue that the Supreme Court is interested in is this right to judicial review, that every American has a right to his day in court before the government can start fining you, before the government can start telling you whether you can build your home or not. And the strange
Obama doesn't believe we should have that right. Obama believes that the government should be able to seize your property and there should be nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question that the attitude that EPA has taken to this point is that, which is we can order you to do whatever we want to your property, and you cannot get your day in court to say that we have no legal rights to order that. And so that is the issue that the Supreme Court is going to address, whether the Sacketts can, as they want to, go ahead and file suit in federal court, challenge the EPA and say, look, the agency, you don't have any authority to control our property because there are no wetlands on the property, and therefore we should be able to go forward and build our home without being subject to millions of dollars.
Right. And so even if your clients win in the Supreme Court, it doesn't mean they get to build on their land. All they do is win the right to have a hearing whether or not they can build on their land.
Exactly. This is just the first and important step in a longer journey.
So it's an even bigger legal battle than that. But, based on what principle might the Supreme Court rule against you and say, no, there is no right to a hearing, that a government agency can make an arbitrary decision and take your property, give you nothing for it, and you have absolutely no legal recourse?
Well, it's hard to imagine the court coming out that way, but certainly EPA is going to say that it would be a harm to the environment if it had to go into court every time a property owner disagreed with what the agency was doing, because then the agency wouldn't be able to effectively administer the Clean Water Act and other environmental statutes, and that we would have environmental catastrophes going on without effective enforcement.
So in other words, constitutional rights, observing our constitutional rights would be inconvenient for the EPA, and therefore, in order to not inconvenience the EPA, our constitutional rights should go out the window. Basically, that is their claim.
Exactly. To the EPA, the Constitution is an inconvenience that should be avoided.
I think this would be a great campaign issue for anybody who runs against Barack Obama. I mean, put this couple up on a commercial, show that Barack Obama is siding with the EPA and against the Sacketts and against all Americans. I mean, they're talking about, property and housing and how we can bail out people who bought houses they couldn't afford. At the same time, they want to take the property away from Americans who bought a property they could afford, yet they want to seize it.
It's topsy-turvy world, no question.
Yeah, I think it would be a great issue. Now, what do you think the odds are as a lawyer or to handicap this? What do you think? I mean, do you think, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think the odds are that the Sacketts are going to win?
I think the odds are pretty good, Peter, because every federal court, lower federal court, that has addressed this issue over the last 20 years has ruled in favor of EPA and against property owners. And so for the Supreme Court to have taken this case up from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to look at the issue shows me that they obviously think something is wrong. Otherwise...
Now, what happened in the Ninth Circuit? Who won in the Ninth Circuit?
The EPA won in the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit said basically that EPA is right, that the Sacketts don't have a right to sue right away. They basically have to abide by what EPA has told them to do.
Well, if they did that, they would have no money and no ability to even sue. So
that's exactly right.
And it shows you the Ninth Circuit has no credibility. What a lousy decision that the Ninth Circuit wouldn't respect the Sacketts' rights. So you are the ones that made the decision to appeal. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did grant certiorari on this particular case. I mean, they could have easily just refused and allowed that Ninth Circuit's decision to stand as law. But they are going to hear it. I think there's a lot at stake here. I mean, it's not just for the Sacketts, but I think for all Americans. And what do you think would be the effects of a Supreme Court reversal of the Ninth Circuit and the Sacketts prevailing here? What kind of effect would that have on the U.S., on individual rights, and on the EPA?
Well, it would certainly be a statement that the EPA is not above the law, and that folks who receive compliance orders from the EPA, and EPA issues from 1,500 to 3,000 compliance orders every year throughout the country. So for every individual American citizen who gets one of these compliance orders, he now knows that he does have a right to go into court to challenge EPA. And frankly, Peter,
well, I really appreciate, Damien, what you're doing. I appreciate your company. I really, my heart goes out to the Sacketts. I wish them luck. I'm hoping. I just bought my house in Connecticut. I hope the EPA doesn't declare it wetlands, because it would really cost me a lot of money to bulldoze this place and to plant all kinds of wetland trees. So I hope for all of our sakes that you can prevail. Anyway, hey, that's it for everybody today. Thanks for listening to the Peter Schiff Show here on SchiffRadio.com. Don't forget, tune in again tomorrow. It's Open Line Friday, 2 hours of your calls and my response here on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.